Hi, everybody. My name is Paige Velasquez Betty. In our last session, we discussed the critical importance of building a consumer-driven brand in today's competitive landscape, especially before entering the procurement process. Now, procurement teams increasingly look for brands that have already earned customer trust because this trust is going to reflect the brand's overall performance. It's also going to reflect the brand's overall integrity. So today we're just going to dive a little bit deeper in this quick hit session about the technical side of a consumer driven brand and how to build that in a way that it can be applied not only to B2C companies, but also B2B brands as well. Now, we're going to explore in this session the three final steps in the brand building roadmap. Now, focusing on content strategy as well as media and PR. But before we dive into these elements, it's essential that to have your foundation set right, you have to complete those first three steps of the branding roadmap. I see so many businesses that get really excited and jump into all of the fun activities that we're going to talk about in this session, and they don't focus on getting the foundation right first. That's going to be incredibly important in order to be truly successful with all the activities that you're going to be generating in the last three steps of the roadmap, which we're going to talk about today. So I want to start by just revisiting the landscape before we get into too much of the tactical. Now, understanding the media landscape when it comes to rented media, earned media, and owned media, it's important to understand how all of those work together. Now, for B2C brands, building an owned media audience, that last piece of the media landscape, that's going to be significantly important because it increases the value of your brand to a procurement team. Now, for B2B businesses, it's not just about the numbers in terms of cultivating owned relationships. It's more about doing it with the right people, making sure that the right relationships happen, whether it's for vendor partnerships, maybe it's for investors or decision makers that you're going to be coming to in a procurement process. One of the biggest shifts in the media landscape is how do we move away from large generic mass media and how do we start focusing more on micro media? Because the reason why we need to look at this shift is we're, as consumers, becoming a lot more skeptical and projecting bias and projecting filters on the types of content that we're consuming. So we're finding less value investing our time in really paying attention to generic mass media as consumers and focusing more on micro media outlets. So take my own experience, for example. For example, every morning on my commute would listen to the Bobby Bones radio show. And for those of you that are maybe familiar with it, it is a famous country music show. What I love about the Bobby Bones show is they went a step beyond the typical country music radio show, and they would bring in the people that were involved behind the scenes in the music industry. They would bring in the songwriters, the managers, the publishing deals, and have some interviews on that. But what I was finding is I was spending 30 to 40 minutes listening to this on my commute in the morning and getting about only a 3 to 4 minute segment of the actual interviews with people behind the scenes. So what I started doing was turning off the radio show in the morning, and I would connect my phone and listen to the Bobbycast, which is Bobby Bones, the radio show host, his podcast. And what he did with his podcast is he had a 30 to 40 minute format where he only interviewed those people behind the scenes in the music industry. And I've started to do this type of shift when it comes to content about marketing, when it comes to content about leadership. I recently did this to make sure to catch up on all of the Olympics that were going on. I didn't have time to watch them during the day or the primetime recap at the end. I was just going to TikTok and typing in Simone Biles to make sure I saw her floor performance. So the same thing is happening with every other type of media in terms of how people are consuming it. We're redeploying our attention away from that generic mass media now to what we call micromedia, which is typically more niche, smaller, trusted, more valuable sources of content. And as brands, this is a powerful reminder that your audience is more interested in paying attention to you, someone that they could bring a lot of interest in if you are delivering a lot of value, than being sold to all of the time by generic mass media and by advertising. And so when you start to build out your brand online, your goal should be for your audience to view you with the same regard they would have viewed reputable media outlets like, for example, a Forbes, a Harvard Business Review, a Good Morning America. As we dive into content marketing strategy, the key question is not where you should be creating content. The much more important question is what type of content is your audience going to find the most valuable? So as you think about a content strategy, I want you to think of yourself almost if you are the editor-in-chief of your own newspaper. And there are 3 categories of content that fall into your newspaper. And this is how you structure all of your content moving forward. The first category is what we call you-driven content. So this is the content that connects back to your intellectual property. This includes your products, your methodologies, your frameworks, your services, your lessons learned, your personal stories about your journey. This type of content can be extremely impactful when done right, but it shouldn't dominate your content output. If it does, it might feel like you're shouting into an empty room and you're not gonna get a lot of traction. You're gonna get burnt out really quickly. So instead of making you-driven content, 99% of what you're putting out there, I want to encourage you to make that only about 20% of the type of content that you're putting out moving forward. Now, the next category of content is more what we call our news-driven content. So this is looking at like a newspaper, for example, you being the editor-in-chief. A newspaper is filled with news stories and breaking news items. So when we think about news-driven content, it should either be calendar-driven, so thinking about what type of year is top of mind for your audience and how can you speak to that in your content, or it's looking at what we call headline-driven. So breaking news stories, new studies that are coming out that your audience is paying attention to you, and how can you tie in your expertise or your product to provide value on that. As an expert, as a leader in an industry, your goal is to help them analyze issue and provide valuable insights. Now, the third category of content is arguably the most important. It's also the most fun though, and this is what we call relationship building content. This is where content marketing becomes a really powerful tool for building relationships. So if you think about the 25 most important relationships that you need to be building on behalf of your business over the next year, instead of doing cold outreach, which most people are going to quickly dismiss once they get that email or text message, I want you to flip the script. And I want you to start your own interview series and use your content, whether it's a blog, written interview series, a podcast, audio, video, whatever it might be. I want you to invite these 25 people into a peer-to-peer conversation. This approach not only opens the door, but also provides you as an expert where you can bring just as much expertise to the conversation, endear yourself, and have 30 to 45 uninterrupted moments to get to know that person better, to get to deepen a relationship, and to endear yourself. Now, even if the relationship doesn't immediately lead to business, it enriches your content and really starts to build more long-term value. Now, I want to shift for a minute and I want to focus on LinkedIn. And in the deep dive, we go a lot more into LinkedIn, but I want to, for a minute, just focus on the importance of your personal brand as the owner or top executive of your company versus just your company's brand. As you represent your company in a procurement process, in investor meetings, B2B sales, vendor relationships, your personal brand is oftentimes going to serve as the very first impression for your company. And as we talked about earlier, first impressions and happen entirely online on page one of Google now. So it's crucial that whatever they're finding in that Google search, you're doing everything you can to accelerate them into working with the company, and you're also giving a really strong representation of your brand. Now, for a lot of you, whenever you search your names as owners or executives, the first thing that's going to populate naturally is LinkedIn. And that's why we spend a little bit of time on that in the deep dive. When it comes to your brand on LinkedIn, I want you to think of it kind of like a mini website. It's your home base online. And I want you to pay attention to things like your cover image, the headshot that you have on there, the headline, the about section, and really sharing your company's post to make sure that it gets a lot more visibility. LinkedIn looks at your personal profile very differently than they look at your company's. They're gonna put a lot more love and weight in an algorithm towards your personal profile than your company's profile, because they, exceedingly want you to pay in order for your company's profile to be seen, but your personal profile has a little bit of advantages. So you could absolutely be successful by focusing there. I would say if you're in B2B, relationship building on LinkedIn is extremely important. Now, finally, I want to talk about earned media. This is PR. So this is a powerful way to credential yourself and your brand. There are two types of PR when it comes to earned media. On one side of the area, we have what we call big banner media. So this is all about, the name brands like Forbes, Inc., Fortune, Business Insider, Good Morning America, The Today Show. All of these media outlets are really great for credibility. But micro media is on the other side of our strategy. So we want to have the two going at the same time. We do not want to dismiss micro media because these are our niche podcasts, trade publication. And if you are focused on lead generation for your company or you're in a very niche industry, micro media can be a very strong advantage in terms of your media outreach. Now, some of you might already be working with a publicist. So if you are, I would ask, do you have that two-pronged approach to your strategy? But if you're looking at hiring a publicist, this can be a valuable investment to secure these types of media opportunities. These can help accelerate the speed in which you're able to get there. But if you're not ready for that, tools like Help a Reporter Out, there are other things that I talk about in the deep dive that can help you generate PR on your own. Now, as you embark on this journey of building a consumer-driven brand, I want you to always focus on that media mindset versus marketing mindset that we talked about earlier. Think of yourself more like a media outlet. Curating content that way, pushing out content that way is going to accelerate trust, but it's also going to build loyalty and provide value that will foster your audience more long-term. I encourage you to revisit the 6 steps of the roadmap that we discussed in the 2 deep dives, really to ensure that your foundation assets are set up for success. Again, don't go and do all these fun, shiny things like content marketing, email marketing, PR, unless those foundational assets are there, because you're not going to get where you want to go fast if you do not have those things in place. And you're also not going to generate the results that you want to see. The most important thing to remember is that this does not happen overnight. So you've got to give yourself grace. You've got to start on this before you get into that procurement process to set yourself up for success, and also focus on building a meaningful audience that's empowered to go out and talk about their experiences in a way that's going to support